Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Coffee Chat with CastleHill. Today, I'm joined by one of our Defendify specialists, Shanna Utgard. Shanna, would you introduce yourself and maybe a little bit about Defendify?
Absolutely. Thank you, Tim. I am Shanna Utgard. I am the success manager at Defendify. We are an all in one cybersecurity platform that makes cybersecurity possible for all businesses.
And very well. Shanna, I think the overall theme for today is, just about, as you put it, cybersecurity. It's not if, it's when, right? And so, just some of the trends that we have going on right now. Recently we had the exchange vulnerability. We've, just constantly having different ransomware, phishing, other types of activities. What are some of the common themes across cybersecurity right now?
I think one of the great common themes across cybersecurity right now is an overall increased awareness because there are a lot more stories that are hitting the national headlines with the exchange vulnerability, SolarWinds. It's something that's becoming a part of everybody's daily conversation. Previously, nobody was going into their BNI groups and talking about the ransomware attack that they narrowly avoided. So an increased awareness and conversation is definitely something we're seeing in the cyber landscape. The pandemic has helped with the emergency transitions to working remotely. But as far as the bad actors, a few of the things that we're consistently seeing and seeing huge increases in are phishing emails, business email compromise. If a week doesn't go by that we don't hear a horror story about someone's email account being taken over, more phishing attacks, ransomware being delivered through exposed ports in the firewall, just ransomware deliveries in general, and bad password health and lack of multi-factor authentication. I'd say those are kind of the top threats that are consistently out there.
One of the great features I love about Defendify is that you guys send out those sort of synopsis of the threat notifications. I think I saw one just last week, or maybe the week before, or in the past week or so, just around the fact that there's been a targeting of more executive level folks within different industries, and what's that all about?
It is really fascinating. It's fascinating and terrifying the lengths that these bad actors are going through to target executives. They're doing their research. They're on your company website. They're looking at your About Us page. They're scrolling through LinkedIn and viewing the different relationships and who holds what position. They're looking at your individual personal social media accounts and looking for anything that's of interest, where you went to college, these little personal details, not only to try to guess your password, but also to develop these really targeted and detailed phishing emails. And they're aimed specifically at certain people in the organization. They're aimed at the executive level, or they're aimed at the accounts payable and accounts receivable individuals in your organization. And they're attaching these documents that they know that you have to open as part of your job. So, if it's a senior executive, they're sending out an email that says, please take a look at this budget. Or if it's somebody in accounts payable, they're, finding out the overdue invoices. And it's crazy the amount of research that they're doing behind the scenes in order to make those spear phishing emails even more targeted.
Yeah, it's really an interesting aspect of it because I think that they're going after those higher risk opportunities, whereas perhaps in the past it was more of a blanket activity. Now, if you're going in and getting an executive who's already being, shall we say, the rules perhaps are being bent for that person because of their senior position. It must provide you with a much greater footprint for attack from there once you get in.
I talk to so many organizations and they're getting set up with these managed phishing simulations, these, practice at bats with learning how to recognize a phishing email is coming in, reinforcing what your internal policy is on how to deal with those. And I have so many companies that I work with that say, "Oh, no, 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 we're not going to fish the CEO or the CFO or the executive leadership team." And it's like, why? Are you worried about them failing a phishing simulation and showing up on a report and embarrassing them? I mean, I understand there's some amount of office politics that goes on, but that's who the bad guys are targeting. Why would you not want to fish the people that are the targets of the actual fishes? I mean, everybody receives these emails. Everybody should be getting that ongoing training. And I think there should be just as much accountability and participation from the top down. And one of the things we say all the time is that cybersecurity is not a project. It's not something that you do once and then you're done and you get to, walk away. It's an ongoing posture that everyone in the organization has to take, and that's from the top down.
Absolutely. And you alluded to it before. So defense in depth has been resurgent in the past year with the pandemic and forcing people to be out. I've been mentioning in this podcast that we're effectively in a business resiliency, crisis for the past 18 months, in effect, right? Between when this started and started to come through it. And so when we think about defense in depth, there's the training you just mentioned, right? So making sure that everybody's getting trained, people are getting those phishing attacks. What else are people doing? What are you hearing?
One of the approaches that we really like to take, because there's no one size fits all approach for cybersecurity. Some organizations might be under regulatory and compliance requirements. Other ones might be under a directive of, their board, and or work with large enterprise organizations. I always refer back to the Target breach. Everybody remembers Target. Target's name was associated with it. I mean, I know people personally who are like, I'm not shopping there. But what they don't remember is that it was perpetrated through a small HVAC contractor. So all of these large enterprise organizations are, wisening up to the risks that their third parties and their vendors and these other, smaller guys pose to them, because these bad guys are going through the small guy, and we call it island hopping, island hopping over into the big guys networks. So the big guys notice this, and they have these vendor risk assessments. So a lot of the times that's what's motivating these organizations to implement a cybersecurity program. And then there's other people who are just conscious that this is a risk, and there are expenses and consequences that are involved if they don't have good cybersecurity protections in place. So you can't just develop a one size fits all approach for cybersecurity. So we really like to start off with a risk assessment and understand what type of data we're trying to protect, who we're trying to protect it from, how they would go about trying to get that data, what the damages and the effects would be if they were successful in that. And also, how much trouble are the organizations willing to go through to protect that data? So that's where we start. That way we have a good picture. I mean, if you went into the doctor's office and they just started like prescribing medication and ordering surgeries without running any tests first, you'd be like, that's a little weird. So we take the same type of approach, do some diagnostics, run some tests, figure out where our strengths and weaknesses are, and then from there determine, what technology tools we can put in place, at a starting level to prevent those attacks. Spam filters is a great example, to stop email attacks from coming in. Dark web stolen password scanning, for any compromised credentials that have been breached previously that might be used in a credential stuffing attack to gain access to your more important accounts. Website scanning, vulnerability scanning. Are there out of date devices or software that you're running that could be used to exploit you? The human element, as you talked about, is very important. There's some other things that are less fun and exciting, like policies, procedures, having all of those documents in place for if something bad does happen. More user training and testing, and then some advanced endpoint protection that is capable of noticing if something bad has happened. And it's kind of like if you put layer after layer of Swiss cheese in place, there are little holes in each piece of cheese. Hopefully at each layer we're able to stop someone trying to come through. But if an attacker gets all the way through all those different layers of defenses, we want to make sure that we have a good documented incident response plan in place, cyber insurance to be able to recoup any of those damages, backups that have been tested regularly, and make sure we can recoup any of that information and data that's lost.
And I think one thing that sometimes people forget, and I'm not sure if you're hearing this as well, is the fact that for something like a California data privacy or New York DFS 500, where there's a lot of regulatory scrutiny on the fact that your internal teams shouldn't be sharing information inappropriately without a business need overall, right? This kind of training is interesting because it's not just about the people on the outside, right? It's also about the people on the inside and being able to see those things through these situations. Are people coming to you talking about that as well?
We talk a lot about, the least amount of privilege somebody needs in order to do their job. And that's another thing that we talk about in the technology and data use policy in our incident response plans, is making sure that we're controlling access to the information, and that they're not, that people only have what they need to do their job and not anything beyond that. And this especially gets really interesting. HIPAA is another example of compliance where people shouldn't be accessing medical records if they have no reason to. It's great if a celebrity comes into your organization, but you shouldn't be reading through their medical file. And you add a whole new layer of complexity in there with people working from home and being able to monitor those types of things and what type of information. Is somebody saving a sensitive document on their personal desktop, and are they printing things out? I worked with a company to set up a rotating shredding schedule because they had employees that needed to print sensitive, PII and PHI, and there was really not a lot of way around it. So we came up with a rotating schedule of when these people were able to come, socially distanced and masked up in order to come into the office for their shredding.
That's that was very good of you to do. No question.
Gotta think quick, pivot.
Yeah, that's right. And the business resiliency aspect of it, right? So that's been a real challenge for everybody, and I think we've seen a great growth in companies who are now focusing on those aspects of things, those operational aspects of it, but not just the because you can't go and work at a Starbucks, right? So that's not the kind of disaster we're in, right? Where you can just go and do something. So, like you said, being able to be in a situation where we're socially distanced, where we're able to follow the appropriate protocols and doing those activities, I think it's been really interesting to see how people have responded to that. It's made people more aware, I think, and I certainly would look for your feedback. More aware of the fact that they now have these assets available to them in potentially sensitive places, in the home, kids right behind them doing schoolwork or other things like that. Have you been hearing about that? As people been much more interested in the product and sort of the ideas because of it?
I have seen people who have no desire to be interested in any type of security whatsoever that are interested in this. I was talking to some teenagers one day about the large European data center fire, and they were like, "Yeah, the video games that we play, we weren't able to get to it because they had, all of their hosting over there." And so it's even coming up in opportunities for discussion with people who have no interest in cybersecurity whatsoever, which is just fascinating because I'm no longer just the friend that's always walking around in the tinfoil hat anymore.
We have a lot of company. It's okay from
Yes.
that side of it. The when in our space, right? So as Defendify as a partner of ours, right, we're looking at that holistic operational risk space overall, and like I mentioned before, things like different regulatory environments that we have to deal when HIPAA, like you talked about, other types of areas. We have all these pieces where privacy is adding, or excuse me, where cybersecurity is adding to the overall footprint for somebody's cyber privacy regulations or their capability from that perspective. Are there any other sort of perspectives that people are bringing to this? Is there, we have the ransomware side of it. So are people looking to decrease those threats, or are they? Is it always after the fact, and they're really coming after the fact to do it?
This is one of the most frustrating parts of my job is we end up talking to so many organizations who are trying to close the barn doors after the horses have already escaped. And it's not one of those things where you can just keep taking the ostrich approach and burying the head in the sand. Although I did learn that ostriches don't actually do that, but you get the point. Uh, so they're taking more of a reactive instead of a proactive approach. And I've had a lot of discussions with people where they say, I'm kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place because if I, go to the powers that be and I get budget and I implement all of these technology solutions and nothing happens, did nothing happen because we had really great cybersecurity measures in place and we had a lot of proper protocols and we approached this in a healthy way, or were we just not targets to begin with, which everybody's a target. Or they go and they get budget approval for all of these solutions, and they put a really well-rounded cybersecurity program in place, and then something happens anyways. So then the decision makers are saying, well, we gave you all of this money to spend on these technology tools, and we had a security incident. So it's a difficult discussion there. And people don't realize how much they really are targets until something bad happens. And it's part of the most frustrating piece of my job is there are so many organizations that I just want to say, you don't understand how bad this could be or how bad this could affect you. And then when they do have something happen, it's like, like I feel like I failed them in not being able to convey the urgency and the impact and how bad this could be and how likely it is to actually happen. Um, we had a company here in Maine that we talked to that had a ransomware attack, and they were down for a month. And they were like, "We didn't think that, like the particular service that we provide, we didn't think that we were targets. We don't have health information. We don't process credit cards. We don't, work with big companies. We don't have sensitive information." So they were down for an entire month from this ransomware attack. And it's fascinating too because it's literally being the attackers are running their organizations like the cyber version of Ocean's 11. It's like a whole multi-level marketing pyramid scam with everybody having different roles and responsibilities. You can buy ransomware as a service kits on the dark web where you just, anybody, I could buy one and launch it at different organizations if I had an email list and send a phishing email to get them to engage with it. And if they open it up and I'm able to, encrypt all of their files, half of the decryption price goes to me, half of it goes to that malware creator. So you don't even have to have any experience. They've got online chat and support and everything.
So the awareness part of this is really, when we talk to customers, we're always talking about what the financial impact is, right? Because I think there's an aspect where people, like you said in that example you gave, where people think it just means, well, my PC will be locked up, or something minor is going to happen, some minor inconsistency. When we look at it from a financial impact perspective, which is really what the job is from a risk management perspective. It's not just about whether or not you're going to be able to get to your files, but what's the financial impact of these things. What's the key, what are the top two things that you think are the awareness that people should have around that aspect of it? What do you tell people besides that you have a tinfoil hat?
I tell them a lot of things. One of the fun stories that I love to tell is how I got into cybersecurity because I don't come from a massively technical background. Everything I've learned has kind of been on the job training. But I had many different acts in my past lives, and one of them was working in a law office as a real estate paralegal. So we processed millions of dollars of real estate transactions every day. And one of the real estate brokers that we worked with had some business email compromise, and the bad guys were in her email account for months, and they were just watching all of the details of all of these real estate transactions and closings and just lurking watching. They found a transaction with a mail away seller who wasn't local here, and she had a very distinct style about how she wrote her emails. She signed all of them with a nickname, and they made a fake email and launched it out of the real estate broker's account saying that last minute, the day of the closing, oh, I see you got the closing package. Oh, I was talking to my husband. We decided we wanted our wire to go to our Bank of America account instead of our Chase account. Here's the updated instructions, quirky little personality things thrown in there, signed with the nickname, and fired it off from the real estate broker's account looking like it had been sent from the seller. I didn't really think anything of it. We had no formal process for verification of those types of requests. So I updated the wire instructions and I sent $2.1 million to a cyber attacker. I consider myself a relatively intelligent person, and I didn't think that I'd fall for some cyber scam or whatever, but I did. And then I saw our co-founder of our company give a cybersecurity awareness presentation, and I said, whatever he's doing, I want to be a part of this. I want to help other people learn about these types of threats so that nobody feels that gut wrenching pit of your stomach feeling when something happens. So that's definitely something that I talk about a lot. The other thing that I talk about too is cyber insurance. A lot of people think that having cyber insurance means that they, are covered in the event of an incident. Um, I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with companies who thought they had a really good cybersecurity insurance policy, and when push came to shove, they were denied for one reason or another.
That's really good advice. That's yeah. I don't think about that one ever. Obviously, we have a lot of folks who are thinking that those types of things are going to provide that type of coverage for any situation, but without some of the things you talked about, without those strong policies, procedures, and actually being able to demonstrate the effort that you're going through, becomes a different game.
I have homeowners insurance, but when I leave for the day, I, close my blinds, I lock my door. I'm not anticipating that my house is going to be broken into, but I still take, every amount of precautionary measure that I possibly can. I've got, a security camera outside, and I'll get a notification on my phone if any. Most of the time, it's just a deer going by, but if there's any motion outside or my security camera's triggered, I've got a warning, and I take all those precautions and have all those measures in place to try to prevent something from happening. But worst case scenario, have my insurance policy to recoup any losses.
Yeah, that's it's not risk management, right? Back to the theme of this. It's not if, it's when, but that's just one prong in it. Overall, you got to be ready for it. Overall, that's good. One of the other interesting, I think, innovative capabilities you guys are putting out is the SIM feature, where you actually are providing that to companies as a. How is that differentiating Defendify, and how is that really making customers more successful?
I like to think of it as having multiple layers of, education and degrees. Some of the organizations that we work with in the job that they're going into, they just need a bachelor's degree. So we have our basic Defendify modules, our policies, our training, our scanning and technology tools, and that is enough to get them to a reasonable or an acceptable risk level for a reasonable investment. Then we have kind of our master's degree program, which includes, internal vulnerability scanning and making sure that all of the, patches and updates have been applied, that there aren't any CVEs that are unresolved. Penetration testing. So we'll actually have one of our ethical hackers attempt to break in and see how far they can get in and how much they can extract back. For a lot of companies, that helps them meet their compliance requirements, and that's, plenty enough to do their jobs. This gives us a PhD in cybersecurity. This is if you want to have ultimate peace of mind. I ask organizations all the time, if you had a cyber attack at 2 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday, how confident are you that you have the tools in place to detect it and the team that can respond to it and contain it and remediate it? If you had a bad guy in your network, or an active attack right now, would you know it? So the breach detection and response service kind of takes it to that next level for our customers who are really trying to be proactive. You can have all those different layers of defense in place, but inevitably something can happen with, vendors or compromised credentials, or, a really well-crafted phishing email. So having that kind of last line of technology defenses in place without having to have a full-time security staff, without having to pay for some type of, aggregator that's going to pull all of your different logs in from all your different separate systems. A lot of security is kind of siloed. You have your email accounts, you have your endpoint behavior, you have your firewall and your network activity, you have your cloud applications, and they're all kind of individual. Having a solution that brings all of the suspicious activity or the anomalies together to have a more complete picture, and then a full team to be able to respond to any suspicious events or attacks. So if you have a security incident at 2 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday and you're snoozing with your sweetie, you just keep on sleeping. We're going to handle it. And when you wake up in the morning, we'll have a nice report prepared for you that says, hey, this was an incident that occurred. This is how it happened. This is what we did to contain and remediate. And here's a couple of recommendations on how to prevent that from happening again. For our IT professionals who are trying to, show some value and show a quantifiable result for their other, non-IT leadership members, they have a security hygiene score that they can watch improve every single month, and just a full visibility. And it's like having a cyber SWAT team on your side without having to staff up for it.
I think, and that really reinforces the whole defense in depth concept, right? Making sure that you can really see the awareness, the training, all of those pieces coming together in results, right? And actually, because you are being attacked somewhere right now, even if you don't know it, and so being able to show that you have a response and those responses are happening is good for you as the employee and good for you as the company. So great things. So I really appreciate you spending a little bit of time with me, Shanna. These were all really good topics. I love the product. I love the service you guys provide. So I think we definitely will continue to have these conversations.
Perfect.
Thanks, Shanna. Have a great day.
Thank you.